The monitor flickered to life, projecting Adam Schiff's visage directly at him. It was a younger version from 2017, with darker hair and eyes shining with the specific assurance of someone who feels invincible. He was positioned opposite Chuck Todd on MSNBC, leaning in as his voice resonated through the chamber with absolute distinctness. "Actually, no, Chuck. I can say the case goes beyond that, and while I cannot detail the specifics, there is more than just circumstantial proof now." The footage snapped to a different scene, same face, but a CNN broadcast in December 2017. The Russians proposed assistance. The campaign welcomed that assistance, and both parties attempted to hide that assistance, which represents, I believe, the precise definition of collusion. The video cut to ABC in October 2017 with George Stephanopoulos. Much of that has been verified. He was referring to the Steele dossier. That assortment of claims Special Counsel Durham would eventually reveal as invented gossip from a Russian émigré who admitted to the FBI it was merely rumor. Schiff was informing the nation it had been confirmed. The scene shifted to MSNBC with Rachel Maddow in November 2017. "We are nearing a case that can be prosecuted." Cut to CNN in 2019. "The proof is right out in the open." Cut to ABC in 2020. "We currently possess abundant evidence." The monitor went black, leaving the Hart Senate Office Building hearing room in total silence. Every member of the Intelligence Committee remained completely still. The media section, which had been murmuring since the session started, was now quiet. Somewhere in the rear, a camera shutter snapped once before ceasing. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard sat at the witness station. She was dressed in a dark navy suit, her bearing military erect, the stance of a woman who had passed 2 decades in uniform. She had endured 3 tours in combat zones and sufficient time in hearing rooms to understand that silence, when used effectively, resonates louder than any charge. She allowed the quiet to linger for 3 entire seconds before she began speaking. "Now, let me read what the witnesses who testified to your committee stated under oath, Senator." She unclasped a folder, not a binder, but a solitary manila file that was thin because facts take up less space than falsehoods. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, quote, "I never observed any direct empirical proof that the Trump campaign or anyone within it was scheming or conspiring with the Russians to interfere with the election," end quote. She flipped a sheet. Former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates was asked if she possessed evidence of collusion, and the answer was no. She turned another page to former National Security Advisor Susan Rice. Same inquiry. Answer, no. She shut the file. "Senator Schiff, you were present in the room when these witnesses stated these things. You possessed their transcripts, you classified them, you concealed them for over a year, and you released them only when the White House threatened to do so first. And then, fully aware of what these witnesses had testified under oath, you appeared on television hundreds of times and told the American public the exact reverse." She stared straight at him. "You did not misspeak. You did not exaggerate. You lied intentionally and repeatedly for 7 years. You did this while holding a security clearance that granted you entry to the most delicate intelligence in this nation. That was access you utilized not to educate the citizenry, but to mislead them." Senator Adam Schiff sat 6 chairs to her left on the elevated dais. His palms were pressed flat against the table. His expression was arranged in the practiced mask of a man who has spent decades in governance and realizes the lens captures every nuance. Yet behind that facade, something was fracturing. It was not because the charges were novel, as he had listened to variations of them for years. This time, however, the allegations arrived bundled with his own voice, his own visage, and his own phrasing on a screen, played in order against the sworn evidence of his own witnesses. You can wave away an allegation. You can reframe a headline. You cannot retract what you stated on camera. To comprehend how they arrived at this point, where the man who spent 7 years as the figurehead of the Russia probe found himself watching his credibility dismantle in real time, you must retreat 4 hours to the morning when Adam Schiff still thought he was the prosecutor and Tulsi Gabbard was the accused. He got to the Russell Senate office building at 7:15. His chief of staff, Patrick Boland, was already present with a briefing dossier, 2 lattes, and a legal pad filled with talking points. "The declassification is the weak point," Boland stated. "She published the HPSCI report despite CIA protests. Former analysts are on the record stating they were stunned at the degree of detail, and Warner has already termed it reckless. That is your avenue of attack." Schiff nodded in agreement. He sat at his workstation and unsealed the packet. Inside lay 3 lines of inquiry, each crafted to achieve the identical goal. Frame Tulsi Gabbard as a political operative utilizing the intelligence machinery to take vengeance for Donald Trump. This strategy had succeeded previously. It had succeeded against Devin Nunes when Nunes published his memo in 2018. It had succeeded against John Durham when Durham's report was released in 2023. The playbook was elementary and thoroughly tested. Indict the accuser of politicization, recite the sacred mantra of sources and methods, articulate grave worry regarding the harm to intelligence alliances, and allow the press to handle the remainder. CNN would display the Gabbard Endangers National Security banner. MSNBC would schedule 4 former intelligence officers to voice their alarm. The New York Times editorial board would compose a piece regarding the degradation of institutional standards. By nightfall, the hearing would be recalled not for what Gabbard stated, but for what Schiff said regarding what she did. "She is a former Democrat who defected for power," Schiff remarked. "The press already distrusts her, so this ought to be uncomplicated." His communications director, a young woman named Elena, glanced up from her mobile device. "Her favorability among independents is greater than you might anticipate, sitting at 43% in the most recent Reuters survey. The military service resonates well." Schiff dismissed this with a wave. Military service is irrelevant in a hearing regarding intelligence declassification. She lacks the technical qualifications. She has never served as an analyst. She has never managed an intelligence operation. She obtained the position because she stood on a debate platform and supported Trump, and that is the narrative. He had passed the prior evening practicing his inquiries in his Senate office, just as he always did before a significant hearing. He possessed a method. Write the query on a note card. Practice articulating it 3 times. Time the dramatic hesitation. He understood precisely when to decelerate for emphasis. He knew precisely when to gaze at the camera rather than the witness. He knew precisely when to reiterate a phrase for the soundbite. He had prepared 5 questions, each one culminating in the identical deduction. Gabbard is a political operative rather than an intelligence professional. She is declassifying to assist Trump, not to enlighten the public. She is a tool, not a watchdog. The censure did not adhere, Boland reminded him. It actually aided your fundraising. Durham did not adhere, and Mueller did not adhere. She is going to raise the same talking points Republicans have been utilizing for years, and you will swat them away just as you always do. Schiff grinned. He had endured worse situations. He had endured the Mueller investigation discovering no conspiracy. He had endured the Durham report. He had endured the censure resolution and had actually raised funds from it, transforming the condemnation into a mark of distinction. It was a proof of concept that he was so potent against Trump that Republicans were forced to officially penalize him. He had converted every assault into a weapon. He turned every allegation into a fundraising appeal. He turned every defeat into a story of political victimization. What Schiff failed to realize, because he had spent so long being the one who directed the narrative that he forgot others could direct it too, was that Tulsi Gabbard had spent 3 weeks readying for this. She prepared the way a combat medic prepares for a mass casualty incident. She worked methodically and quietly. She worked with the knowledge that when the moment arrives, there is no time to improvise. 3 miles away in a secure conference room at ODNI headquarters in McLean, Virginia, Gabbard sat with her general counsel, Marcus Webb, and a small squad of analysts. They had spent the past month constructing what they termed, with the grim humor typical of intelligence professionals, the Schiff file. The dossier was arranged by date. It commenced in January 2017 and concluded in July 2025. It held 3 classifications of material. Each was devastating on its own, but catastrophic when combined. Category 1 consisted of every public declaration Adam Schiff had made regarding Russia collusion on television, radio, or in print. There were more than 200 instances. The team had aggregated them into a searchable database complete with timestamps, networks, and precise quotations. They had also assembled a compilation video. It was 12 minutes in length and professionally edited. It displayed Schiff asserting the same allegations across dozens of appearances, year after year. More than circumstantial evidence. Collusion is a fact. The evidence is in plain sight. Ample evidence. It showed the same words, the same assured delivery, and the same practiced eye contact with the camera. Category 2 contained the sworn testimony of Obama administration officials before Schiff's own committee. This was testimony Schiff had kept classified until he was compelled to release it. Clapper, Yates, Rice, Lynch, Comey, Power, Rhodes. Not a single one of them had verified the existence of collusion evidence between the Trump campaign and Russia. Not one. Category 3 included the declassified documents from July 2025. These were the HPSCI report, the whistleblower account, and the internal emails demonstrating how the intelligence assessment on Russian interference had been built, revised, and promoted despite internal disagreement about its findings. He will attack the declassification, Webb stated. Sources and methods, CIA objections, that is his comfort zone. Let him, Gabbard replied. Every time he speaks about the sanctity of classified information, I get to ask him about reading the Steele dossier into the congressional record. That was a document funded by the Clinton campaign. It was sourced from a fired FBI informant that the FBI's own subsource claimed was based on rumor. He entered it into the permanent record of the United States Congress as fact. She shut the file. He believes this hearing is about me. He thinks it is about what I declassified or whether I am qualified. He is going to spend his 5 minutes attempting to put me on trial. And every time he opens a door, I am going to walk through it using his own words. Webb nodded and asked, what if he does not take the bait? He will, Gabbard asserted. He cannot help himself. He spent 8 years being the cleverest person in every room. He is the person nobody challenges, the media's favorite prosecutor. He has never been in a hearing where the witness fights back. And he has never been in a hearing where the witness possesses his transcripts. She paused and picked up a printout. It was a screenshot of Schiff on CNN from February 2018, captioned, Schiff, evidence of collusion is clear. You know what is remarkable about this? She asked. He did not even need to be cautious. He could say anything, anything at all, and nobody in the media would push back. Not Chuck Todd, not Rachel Maddow, not Anderson Cooper. He possessed the magic shield. I am the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I have access to classified information you do not have. Trust me. And they did. For years, the only person who ever pushed back on a major network was Morgan Ortagus on The View in 2021. She was a guest host, not even a regular. She asked him point-blank about the Steele dossier, and he called her premise a smokescreen. That is how insulated he has been. One adversarial question in 7 years. We are going to give him a lot more than one. Webb looked at the flash drive containing the compilation video. Are we certain about playing this in the hearing? It is unprecedented. So was reading fabricated intelligence into the congressional record, Gabbard said. So was inventing presidential quotes and calling it parody. So was lying about talking to a whistleblower. He set the precedent for the unprecedented. I am just following his lead, and he has never been in a hearing with someone who used to sit on his side of the aisle and knows exactly how the machine works. The hearing commenced at 10 o'clock. The hearing room was at capacity 30 minutes before the gavel. Schiff arrived through the main entrance, pausing briefly for the camera cluster in the corridor. Today, we hold the intelligence community accountable for politically motivated declassifications that endanger American sources and methods, he told a reporter from CNN. He wore a charcoal suit and a blue tie, his standard hearing attire chosen because it reads well on camera and projects the sober authority of a man who takes classified information seriously. The irony of that particular projection would become apparent within the hour. Gabbard entered through a side door. There was no entourage and no dramatic statement to the press. Just a woman with a folder and a flash drive walking to the witness table. She wore a dark navy suit with no jewelry and no accessories. The aesthetic was deliberate, military briefer, not politician. She adjusted her microphone, poured a glass of water, and waited. She did not look at Schiff. She did not need to. She knew exactly where he was sitting and exactly what he was planning to say. She had read every hearing transcript he had ever participated in. She knew his rhythms and his tells. She knew the way he builds to a dramatic question and then pauses for the camera. She knew the way he restates a premise 3 times because he knows the third repetition is the one that gets clipped. She had studied him the way a combat medic studies an anatomy chart, not to heal, but to know exactly where to apply pressure. Chairwoman Susan Collins brought the room to order and read the opening statement. The Select Committee on Intelligence will come to order. Today we will hear testimony from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard regarding recent declassifications of intelligence community documents related to the 2016 election and the origins of the Russia investigation. The first hour was procedural. Republican senators asked about the declassification process. They asked about the whistleblower protections Gabbard had implemented and the progress of the DIGIG, the Declassification and Intelligence Group she had established at ODNI. Gabbard answered in the clipped, precise language of an intelligence briefer. Facts, dates, numbers, no editorializing. Democrat senators followed a coordinated line of attack. Senator Warner of Virginia asked about CIA objections to the declassification. Senator Heinrich of New Mexico raised concerns about foreign partner relationships. Senator King of Maine asked whether the documents had been reviewed by all 17 intelligence agencies before release. Gabbard answered each question directly, acknowledging the concerns while noting that the president had constitutional declassification authority. Then it was Schiff's turn. He adjusted his microphone, straightened his notes, and looked down at the witness table the way he had looked at hundreds of witnesses before. It was the way a prosecutor looks at a defendant who does not yet know the trap has been set. Director Gabbard, he began. In July, you declassified a House Intelligence Committee staff report from 2020. There's the treaties that had been kept classified by both the first Trump administration and the Biden administration. You did so over the objections of CIA officials who warned, and I am quoting from NBC News, that the level of detail exposed could alert Moscow to how intelligence was collected and potentially endanger sources. Former CIA analyst Michael Van Landingham said he was, quote, shocked at what was revealed. My question is simple. Did you prioritize political impact over the safety of intelligence sources? Gabbard leaned toward her microphone. Senator, thank you for the question. The decision to declassify was made in coordination with the President, who has constitutional authority over classification. I take the protection of sources and methods extremely seriously. As someone who served in a combat zone in Iraq, in Kuwait, on the Horn of Africa, my life depended on the quality and security of intelligence. I understand the stakes in a way that goes beyond the theoretical. With respect, Director, you did not answer my question. I am getting there, Senator. I wanted to establish my perspective on classified information because you have raised the subject of its sanctity, and I would like to address that directly. She opened her folder. On March 20th, 2017, you sat in this building, not this room, but the House equivalent, and during an Intelligence Committee hearing, you read allegations from the Steele dossier into the congressional record. The Steele dossier was a collection of opposition research funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign through the law firm Perkins Coie and the research firm Fusion GPS. Its primary source, Igor Danchenko, was later charged by Special Counsel Durham with making false statements to the FBI. Danchenko himself told the FBI in January 2017, 2 months before your hearing, that his information was, and I quote, hearsay and just talk. She looked up. The FBI had already discredited the dossier's key claims and fired Christopher Steele as an informant by the time you read it into the congressional record. Inspector General Horowitz later found 17 significant errors and omissions in the visa applications that relied on it. And yet you presented those allegations, unverified, debunked, sourced from Kremlin-linked gossip, as fact on the floor of Congress in the permanent record. So when you ask me about the sanctity of classified information, Senator, I take the question seriously. But I would respectfully note that the person asking it is the same person who entered fabricated intelligence into the congressional record and defended it on 200 television appearances. The hearing room shifted. Not dramatically, as hearings do not shift the way courtrooms do in movies, but there was a perceptible change in the quality of attention. It was the way people stop looking at their phones and start looking at the people in front of them. Schiff's jaw tightened. He had expected the Steele dossier to come up. He had an answer prepared. He had used it before on The View, on CNN, and in dozens of interviews. He could not have known people were lying to Steele. The dossier needed to be investigated, and he was doing his job. Director Gabbard, the Steele dossier was a matter of legitimate concern that warranted investigation. I stand by the committee's decision to examine its allegations. Senator, I am not asking about the committee's decision. I am asking about yours. I am asking about your personal decision to read unverified claims into the permanent record. Your personal decision to go on television afterward and tell Chuck Todd you had seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion. Your personal decision to tell CNN that collusion was a fact. Your personal decision to tell Rachel Maddow you were very close to a prosecutable case. She paused. I would like to tell you what the witnesses who testified to your own committee said under oath in closed session testimony you classified and kept secret until 2020. Former DNI James Clapper. I never saw any direct empirical evidence that the Trump campaign or someone in it was plotting or conspiring with the Russians. Former Deputy AG Sally Yates, asked if she had seen evidence of collusion. No. Former National Security Advisor Susan Rice. No. Former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Former UN Ambassador Samantha Power. Former Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes. None of them, not one, confirmed the existence of evidence that you claim to have on television. You had their transcripts, Senator. You sat in the room when they said this. And then you went on camera and told the American people the opposite. She let the fact sit in the air like smoke. And I can speak to this from a particular vantage point, Senator, because when you were making those claims, I was a member of the Democratic Party. I was serving in the House of Representatives. I was watching you do it. And what I saw, a colleague using classified access to deceive the public for political advantage, is one of the reasons I left the party. This was the moment Schiff had not prepared for. Not the accusations, for he had heard those before, but the source. Gabbard was not a Republican operative. She was not a Fox News commentator. She was a former Democrat, a former colleague, and a combat veteran who had served in Baghdad while he was building his television career. The partisan attack defense, which had shielded him for years, collapsed the moment she said the words. When you were making those claims, I was a member of the Democratic Party. Schiff regrouped. He was a former prosecutor who knew how to absorb a blow and redirect. He leaned into his microphone and spoke with the controlled intensity of a man who has been doing this for a very long time. Director Gabbard, I appreciate the theatrical presentation, but let's be clear about what is happening here. You left the Democratic Party. You campaigned for Donald Trump. He rewarded you with this position, and now you are using the intelligence apparatus, the same apparatus you accuse me of politicizing, to conduct a political prosecution of a sitting United States senator. This is not oversight. This is retribution. Gabbard nodded slowly. Senator, you are right that I left the Democratic Party. Let me tell you why. Her voice shifted, not becoming louder, but deeper. It was the voice of someone accessing something real. In 2004, I was a state representative in Hawaii, 23 years old. I had just been re-elected. My unit, the 29th Infantry Brigade Combat Team of the Hawaii Army National Guard, was called up for deployment to Iraq. I was not on the mandatory roster. My commander told me I could stay home, keep my seat, keep my career. I volunteered instead. I became the first sitting state official in American history to voluntarily leave public office to serve in a war zone. I served in a medical unit at Logistical Support Area Anaconda in Baghdad. I treated wounded soldiers. I read casualty lists every morning, looking for names I recognized. The sign at the entrance to our base said, "Is today the day?" That was our greeting every day for 12 months. When I came home, I served in Congress as a Democrat for 8 years. I ran for president as a Democrat. I served on the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. And what I saw, Senator, from the inside, was a party that would say anything, use any institution, and weaponize any piece of intelligence to maintain power. The Russia collusion narrative was not intelligence analysis. It was a political operation, and you were its chief architect. So no, Senator, I did not leave because Trump recruited me. I left because of what I saw people like you doing with classified information. I left because I watched you go on television and claim you had evidence that did not exist, while the actual evidence, the testimony of your own witnesses, sat in a classified vault that you refused to open. I served in Baghdad while you served on CNN, and I take the integrity of intelligence more seriously than you ever have." The room was quiet. Schiff's communications team, watching from a staff office on the third floor, exchanged a look that political operatives exchange when they realize the playbook is not working. Elena texted Boland, "He needs to pivot now." But Schiff did not pivot. Schiff did what Schiff always does when a line of attack is not working. He escalated. It was the instinct that had made him famous, and the instinct that would now unmake him. "Director Gabbard, since you have raised the subject of credibility, let me remind you, Senator, since you have raised it, let me add to the record." She did not wait for permission. The cadence of the exchange had shifted. She was no longer answering questions. She was conducting a deposition. September 26, 2019, you chaired a hearing on the Ukraine whistleblower complaint. In your opening statement, broadcast live to millions of Americans, you read what you presented as the president's words to President Zelensky. You said, and I quote, "I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. I am going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good." The president never said those words. Not in the transcript, not in any version of the call, not in any witness account. You fabricated them. When Representative Mike Turner confronted you, you said your reading was meant to be at least in part parody. Parody? The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the person entrusted with oversight of the most sensitive intelligence operations in the United States, fabricated presidential quotes during an impeachment hearing that was broadcast to the entire nation and called it parody? She turned a page. 8 days before that hearing, September 17, 2019, you appeared on MSNBC. A reporter asked you directly whether you or your committee had communicated with the whistleblower. You said, and I quote, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We would like to." PolitiFact rated that statement false. Your committee staff had in fact communicated with the whistleblower before the complaint was filed. The whistleblower had approached your aide. Your aide had briefed you on the outlines of the complaint. You knew, and you said the opposite on national television. Then, when the coordination between your staff and the whistleblower was publicly revealed, you reversed course. You had been demanding that the whistleblower testify publicly. Once the coordination was exposed, you blocked the testimony. You wanted transparency until transparency would expose you. Schiff opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked to Chairwoman Collins, hoping she might intervene on time, but his 5 minutes were not up. He still had time. The problem was that he had nothing to fill it with. Every prepared response, such as, "I stand by the committee's work," or "This is a partisan distraction," or "The evidence speaks for itself," sounded hollow against the specific, dated, documented record that Gabbard was reading into this hearing. It was the way he had once read the Steele dossier into his. Gabbard continued, "And since we are discussing patterns of credibility, Senator, I will note one more item for the record. In May 2025, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency submitted a criminal referral to the Department of Justice alleging that you falsified bank documents and property records on 5 Fannie Mae loans between 2003 and 2019. The allegation is that you claimed your Maryland home as your primary residence on mortgage applications while simultaneously claiming your California condominium as your primary residence for a homeowner's tax exemption. Both at once for 16 years. Fannie Mae's Financial Crimes Unit concluded you engaged in what they called a sustained pattern of possible occupancy misrepresentation. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland has reportedly opened an investigation. I do not know if you are guilty, Senator. That is for the Justice Department to determine. But I find it relevant to this hearing that a man who spent 7 years accusing a president of being compromised by a foreign power based on evidence that his own witnesses said didn't exist is now accused with documentary evidence of lying to banks to get better mortgage rates. Schiff's face had gone through several phases during the exchange: controlled composure, studied indifference, a flash of anger when the mortgage referral came up. And now, something else. Something that looked to the trained eye of the C-SPAN cameras like the particular stillness of a man who realizes he is watching his own narrative collapse and has no way to stop it. This is exactly what the Trump administration wants, he said. His voice had lost its prosecutorial edge, replaced by something tighter and more defensive. Using the intelligence apparatus to persecute political opponents, this is authoritarianism. Senator, Gabbard said, I would like to play something for the committee if the chairwoman permits. Collins nodded. Gabbard's aide pressed a button. The screens on either side of the hearing room lit up. And now we are back where we started. The compilation. Schiff's own face, his own voice, clip after clip after clip. More than circumstantial evidence. Collusion is a fact. The evidence is in plain sight. Ample evidence. Very close to a prosecutable case. Corroborated. Year after year, network after network. The same claims, the same confidence, the same careful eye contact with the camera that had made him one of the most recognizable Democrats in America. Then the audio shifted. It became flat and formal, the cadence of sworn testimony. Clapper. I never saw any direct empirical evidence. Yates. No. Wright. No. The screen went dark. Gabbard spoke into the silence. Senator Schiff has spent the last 7 years telling the American people that he had evidence of a conspiracy between a president and a foreign power. He did not. He told them the Steele dossier had been corroborated. It had not. He fabricated presidential quotes in an impeachment hearing and called it parody. He lied about communicating with a whistleblower and then blocked that whistleblower from testifying when the lie was exposed. He read unverified gossip funded by a political campaign into the congressional record as fact. He kept witness transcripts classified for over a year because they contradicted his public claims and only released them when forced. He was censured by the House of Representatives on June 21, 2023, by a vote of 213 to 209. He had to stand in the well of the House while the resolution was read aloud. That resolution stated, and I quote, that he abused this trust by alleging he had evidence of collusion that never existed, and he is now under federal investigation for mortgage fraud. I served in Iraq. I know what real threats to this country look like. Mortars, IEDs, casualty lists, the sign that said, "Is today the day?" And I can tell you that the greatest threat to American democracy is not a foreign adversary. It is an elected official who uses the most sensitive information in this country to deceive the people who trusted him with it. The documents I have declassified tell the truth. Senator Schiff has spent 7 years trying to prevent the American people from seeing that truth. Today, they saw it. She closed her folder. Chairwoman Collins waited 2 seconds, then spoke. The senator's time has expired. Director Gabbard, thank you for your testimony. Madam Chairwoman, I categorically reject, Schiff began. The senator's time has expired, Collins repeated. The committee will stand in recess for 15 minutes. Schiff sat in his chair. The gavel fell. Senators stood and began filing out. Staff moved through the aisles. The press gallery erupted into the controlled chaos of reporters filing urgent dispatches on phones and laptops. Schiff did not stand. He sat perfectly still, looking at the blank screen where his own face had been playing moments ago. His chief of staff approached from behind, leaned down, and whispered something. Schiff shook his head. Not yet. He was thinking about the compilation, not about its content, as he had heard every criticism before, but about its form. The side-by-side. His own face, his own voice, unedited, unmanipulated, playing next to the sworn testimony of people he had supervised. There was no way to call it doctored, no way to call it taken out of context, no way to call it Russian disinformation or a Republican hit job. It was his words on camera, on networks he chose, in interviews he requested, said with the confidence of a man who believed nobody would ever compile them and hold them up against the actual record. He thought about the Steele dossier. He had read it into the congressional record on March 20th, 2017. He remembered the moment. He remembered believing it, or telling himself he believed it, or telling himself it was worth reading because it might be true. The distinction between those three things had blurred years ago, and he had never been forced to examine which one was real because nobody had ever made him answer for it under these conditions. Not in a cable news interview where he controlled the conversation, not in a friendly congressional hearing where the chairman was an ally, but in a room where a combat veteran with declassified documents and a flash drive full of his own television appearances was reading his record back to him like a court reporter reading a transcript. Boland appeared again. "We need to get to the press room. The longer we wait, the worse it looks." "Give me a minute," Schiff said. He sat for another 30 seconds. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the hallway. For 6 minutes, no Democrat on the committee posted anything on any social media platform. In the Senate, where political communication is measured in seconds, 6 minutes of silence is a geological age. The clips went viral within the hour, not the individual quotes, as those had been circulated before. What went viral was the compilation, the side-by-side. Schiff's own voice making claims on the left half of the screen, his own witnesses denying those claims under oath on the right half. It was simple. It was devastating. It required no commentary. The contrast did the work. The first version to break was a 38-second cut. Schiff saying more than circumstantial evidence, followed immediately by Clapper saying no direct empirical evidence. It hit up to 20 million views by dinner time. By the next morning, it was at 53 million. The second clip that traveled was the Baghdad versus CNN exchange. Gabbard's voice, measured and flat. "I served in Baghdad while you served on CNN, and I take the integrity of intelligence more seriously than you ever have." Someone set it to a slow-motion video of Schiff's face as she said it. The expression, or rather the careful absence of expression, the controlled blankness of a man who has just been hit in a place he didn't know was exposed, became a meme. The third was the parody takedown. Gabbard reading Schiff's fabricated Trump-Zelensky quotes back to him, then the single word, parody. Someone overlaid a dictionary definition of parody on screen and added a question mark. It was shared 4 million times in 24 hours. Schiff held a press conference 90 minutes after the hearing recessed. He stood in the Russell Building hallway with his communications director and 2 sympathetic senators. He delivered the statement his team had prepared during the recess. "What you saw today," he said, "was the latest example of the Trump administration using the intelligence community as a weapon against its political opponents." Director Gabbard's performance was not oversight. It was political theater designed to distract from this administration's systematic dismantling of the institutions that protect our democracy. The words were right. The framing was right. The delivery was polished. But the problem was structural. Gabbard had not mentioned Trump once during the exchange. She had not mentioned the Republican Party. She had not mentioned any political agenda. She had read Schiff's own words back to him and compared them to the sworn testimony of his own witnesses. You can call that political theater, but you cannot call it partisan when the evidence comes from the subject's own mouth. Progressive media tried the familiar pattern. Gabbard turns hearing into political spectacle, ran the MSNBC chyron. Former Democrat uses DNI position to attack Schiff, was the Huffington Post headline. But the compilation video made the coverage irrelevant. 53 million people had watched Schiff say more than circumstantial evidence, and then watched Clapper say no direct empirical evidence. The spin could not survive the side-by-side. The most unexpected reaction came not from Republicans or Democrats, but from former Democrats. People who had left the party over the past 4 years and seen in Gabbard a reflection of their own journey. A retired Army sergeant in Ohio posted a video that got 11 million views. I left the Democratic Party in 2022 because of exactly what Gabbard described. They weaponized everything: intelligence, the DOJ, the media, and Schiff was the face of it. I watched him say he had evidence for 3 years. He did not, and I feel like an idiot for believing him. A veteran journalist, writing anonymously for a media criticism newsletter, published a piece that ricocheted through newsrooms. I spent 3 years repeating Adam Schiff's claims about collusion evidence on air. He was my most frequent source. He was articulate, authoritative, and absolutely certain. And he was lying. I knew the intelligence community was not confirming his claims. I ran them anyway because he had clearance and credibility. He used us. We let him. That is on both of us. A former Democratic state senator from Michigan who had left the party in 2023 posted a thread that was shared 250,000 times. I canvassed for Democrats using the Russia collusion story. I told voters their democracy was under attack by a foreign power. I believed Adam Schiff. Today, I watched him sit in silence while his own words were played back to him. I feel betrayed, not by Republicans, but by the man I trusted to tell me the truth. A Gold Star mother from Virginia called into a radio show and said something that was shorter and more devastating than anything said in the hearing room. My son died in Afghanistan. Adam Schiff voted for the war. He said he had intelligence. Then he spent 7 years saying he had intelligence about Russia. Was that a lie too? How many things did he say he had intelligence about that turned out to be nothing? The question hung in the air, not because it had an answer, but because it revealed the nature of the wound. Schiff's credibility had not been damaged on a single issue. It had been damaged as a category. If a man will lie about having evidence of the most serious conspiracy in modern American history, if he will maintain that lie for 7 years, on hundreds of television appearances, while knowing his own witnesses contradicted him, then what can you believe him about? What can you trust? Where does the lying stop? In California, the reaction was complicated. Schiff had won his Senate seat in 2024 with a comfortable margin. His approval rating was steady, but internal polls taken in the 2 weeks after the hearing showed a 7-point drop. Not because Californians suddenly supported Trump, but because the compilation video forced a simple question that no amount of spin could answer. If he lied about this, what else did he lie about? The mortgage fraud investigation continued quietly. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland had not yet announced any charging decisions, but the shadow of a federal investigation hung over every public appearance Schiff made. The irony was lost on no one. The man who had spent 7 years accusing a president of financial crimes was now himself the subject of a federal financial investigation. The man who had demanded transparency was now invoking the presumption of innocence. The man who had read unverified documents into the congressional record was now asking the public to wait for all the facts before reaching conclusions. The deeper damage was not in any single clip or headline. It was in the pattern that Gabbard had illuminated. A pattern so consistent, so documented, so visible in his own words on his own television appearances, that once you saw it, you could not unsee it. Claim to have evidence that does not exist. Read fabricated documents into the congressional record. Fabricate presidential quotes and call it parody. Lie about contact with a whistleblower and then block the whistleblower's testimony when the lie is exposed. Keep witness transcripts classified when they contradict your public claims. Claim 2 primary residences simultaneously for 16 years to save money on mortgages. And through it all, maintain the posture of a man defending democracy from its enemies while systematically deceiving the people. Democracy is supposed to serve. Gabbard did not call him a traitor. She did not call him a criminal. She did not call him a Russian asset, which would have been the kind of irony he deserved. But she was too disciplined to deliver that. She called him something more precise, something that would be harder to shake, something that would attach to his name in the way that epithets attach to political figures when the public finally sees the gap between the performance and the record. She called him an architect of lies. Gabbard returned to Odni headquarters after the hearing. She did not hold a press conference. She did not post on social media. She went back to work. There were intelligence assessments to review and foreign threat briefings to prepare. The kind of work that does not trend on Twitter because it is classified. When Webb asked her how she thought it went, she said, "I answered his questions and I showed his record. That is what oversight is supposed to look like." "That is not what his hearings usually looked like," Webb said. "No," Gabbard agreed, "because in his hearings, the witnesses were afraid of the camera. They were afraid of the clip. They were afraid of being called a Trump loyalist on the evening news. They forgot that a hearing room is a fact-finding venue, not a television studio. And in a fact-finding venue, the person with the better facts wins, not the person with the better camera angle." When a reporter asked her for comment the next day, she said only, "The documents speak for themselves, and so do Senator Schiff's own words. An architect builds structures, structures that are designed to look solid, to look permanent, to look real. And for 7 years, Schiff's structures had looked real. The collusion narrative, the dossier, the parody, the whistleblower coordination. Each one was a carefully constructed edifice that served its purpose for a time. And then, when examined closely, turned out to be built on nothing. Gabbard did not demolish those structures with accusations. She demolished them with the architect's own blueprints, his own words, his own TV appearances, his own classified transcripts. She held up the plans and showed the public that the foundations were empty. He walked into the hearing room as the questioner. He walked out as the subject, not because Gabbard attacked him, but because she turned on the television and he attacked himself. In the weeks that followed, Schiff did what he had always done. He gave interviews, he raised money, and he posted on social media about threats to democracy and the importance of standing firm against authoritarianism. The machine still worked, the donors still donated, and the base still rallied. But something had shifted, and it was the kind of shift that does not show up in polls or fundraising numbers, but in something harder to measure. The pause. The moment of hesitation when a reporter considers quoting Schiff as a source and remembers the compilation video. The moment when a colleague considers co-signing a letter and remembers the Clapper transcript. The moment when a voter hears him say, "I have evidence," and thinks, "You said that before." Trust, once broken by your own recorded voice, does not come back. Not because people are unforgiving, but because the human mind cannot unwatch what it has watched. And 53 million people had watched Adam Schiff contradict himself clip by clip, year by year, in his own words, on his own chosen stages, with his own confident delivery. The architect had built his most impressive structure, and then, in a hearing room in the Hart Building, a combat veteran from Hawaii showed the American people that the building had no foundation. She did not demolish it, she just turned on the lights. And the building, which had looked so solid in the dark, so imposing, so permanent, so real, turned out to be hollow. A facade built from television appearances and classified access and the particular authority that comes from saying, "I've seen the intelligence," to a country that had no way to check. Now they could check. The transcripts were public, the compilation was everywhere, and the documents were declassified. And a combat veteran who had served in Baghdad and Kuwait and the Horn of Africa. A woman who had left the party, left the comfort of the narrative, left the protection of the machine, had done the simplest and most devastating thing a person can do to an architect of lies. She showed the blueprints, and the American people, 53 million of them and counting, looked at the blueprints and looked at the building and saw that there was nothing inside, and there never had been.